Coach at Rhode Island, Jim Fleming. Good morning, Coach Flem.
Hey, Rob.
Good morning. Bye week. I know you didn't just put your feet up, but how did you make use of it? And was it good to have a little break?
I thought about sitting there telling you guys we patted them up and just scrimmaged every day, but that would be a good lie. No, we did what most people do. We ended up Sunday they were off. Monday we had a little team presentation. Tuesday they were off, and then we got back Wednesday light and got after it Thursday and Friday, and then gave them the weekend to refocus and recenter, and just got off the field a little while ago with our first practice of the week and. Kids are look fresh. It's kind of cool. You see some guys that we needed to get, healthier, and looks like the pep's in their step. So I'm excited to get through a good week of practice and then get on the plane and go play a very good Elon team.
After 9 weeks, you got to be pretty banged up. And I know you've, especially at the running back spot, you've had rotated several guys through there. Do you feel like you're in pretty good shape here for this stretch on now?
Yeah, you mentioned the bye weeks. I was surprised how many people were off this week. So we've all been through the same kind of murderous torture all the way through 9 weeks of the season before you get one. But certainly our running backs, they take a load and you can never have enough. But I feel like, we're as close to full speed as we're going to be with all the guys that we have available. So I, feel really good about that. I think our trainers did a good job working on some of these kids throughout the week, and it's football. We're all going to be beat up towards the tail end of the season, but I think our kids are feeling refreshed from a little bit less on their bodies, not playing a 60-minute game where you got to lay it all out there. But now, you start focusing on, concerns about losing some sharpness or some rhythm. But watching them today, I feel like we're in pretty good shape and poised to have a really good week of practice, and that's what's going to be needed.
Question for you from Steve. Good morning, Steve.
Morning, Rob. Morning, Coach.
Max.
Coach, all coaches talk about self-scouting in that first week of a bye week. When you do that, when you did that, do you learn things about your team that maybe otherwise you wouldn't if you didn't go through that exercise?
Yeah, I think you learn some things statistically, probably in terms of things you might want to do better, maybe not achieving at certain levels. I can't sit there and give you a litany of things we need to be better at X, Y, and Z off of what was studied last week. I think for us, I mean, it all becomes a question of making sure that, we focused a lot more on the fundamental execution of things. I know defensively, we were concerned about setting some edges and doing some things. There was a major emphasis on that, playing with more leverage, better pad level, that kind of thing. Offensively, obviously, just continue to, work on the ball security and your basic fundamentals in terms of the line of scrimmage, getting off the ball and running to your targets and making sure you're able to pick up the combinations necessary. Then the pass game, you just keep, try to keep, improving on that and continue to have that be sharp. So there was a major emphasis on us as well. You've seen how close we've been on special teams with return game, and you've seen a litany of penalty flags come out during the course of those returns, and so we spent a lot of time working on the techniques involved with our return game, both kickoff return and punt return, with the expectation to make better decisions in that split second. Usually that's what ends up happening. If you get a block in the back, it's a bad decision made by the player who has to figure out whether to throw the block or not. So we worked a lot of those in very competitive situations, and I felt like we got better. And, the intent and the hope for us is that, the fundamental improvement that we worked on last week will show through with the schematic structure that we'll put into play against Elon.
And with the extra time, do you put in some wrinkles that show some things in the last few weeks of the regular season before postseason that we haven't seen before?
Now, if we had been doing all that, of course we are. And, would I be telling you what they are? No, I
No,
wouldn't
no,
at
no.
the
I'm just
same
asking
time.
if you
But
do.
yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly there are things that you want to be able to continue to, that you have in your back pocket that you may not have called already, things that you've worked on throughout the course of the year. So those things are still available to us. Not overwhelming, in terms of overall restructure, but certainly there's some things that we'll count on utilizing as we go forward. And most importantly is to be able to get by Elon at this point in time. And And if we're fortunate enough to continue on the role that we're on, then you have opportunities where a lot of other games ahead of us, but that's still 3 games away.
And if I could get one more, just on Elon, Coach, they've been a tough customer all year. I know they had a tough one the other day, but they've played awfully well this year.
That's my take on it. I mean, they're on a 3-game slide right now, and they've all been, single-digit losses that have been very tough for a number of different reasons. I'm sure it's going to be a very angry football team when we show up down there. There's some stat out there that 62% of the time the home team wins in the CAA, so you're already down to 7 points when you get on the plane. But they're talented and they're good. I look at a very, well-built defensive unit that runs around. They've got a couple of real playmakers there that are giving us quite a bit of concern. Offensively, the quarterback, running back tandem they have, puts them along with every other thing they're doing in the top, the top third or so, or just below the top third of every statistical category in football. So, they're hitting, they're just not hitting all cylinders, which I'm sure that they worked on last week. So, offensively, there's some concern to control that quarterback who's running the heck out of it, plus the running back. Those are concerns, and they've got a couple of big guys outside they can get the ball to. So, we've got our hands full, and we know that we're going to have to play well to be competitive and win the game.
Thanks, Coach. Thanks, Rob.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, Steve. Next question from Tiffany. Go ahead, Tiffany.
Good morning, Coach.
Hey, Tiffany, how are you?
Um, Doing good. We talked about the physically beat up and murders and all this. Talking about the mental toughness of this team right now.
Yeah, I think that is they've established a mental toughness throughout the first whatever 9 games of the season. I think we figured out how to win and how to lose. Now, I mean, when you really look at November, is really when your mental toughness is truly tested. You've got to you're staying in the hunt for something that's very important to you. There's a lot of pressure in terms of preparation and expectation to be able to play our best as we go down the stretch. So your mental toughness at this point in time really becomes taxed. And, it's late in the season. No one's feeling 100%, although, like I said earlier, we are feeling pretty good. Um, but your ability to continue to focus on the job at hand, which is extremely short focus, which is come back and have a good Tuesday practice, be able to put forth the effort and the concentration necessary on a day-to-day basis, and then get to game day, you have to be able to hit on all cylinders and be completely focused in it on every snap for 60 minutes. And you look up the scoreboard at the end, you see if you won or lost. But the mental toughness is critically important. It's something that will be tested as we go down the stretch here.
If I can just follow up, side question. As the season comes to an end, or when you focus on maybe something down the stretch, have you and Marcus Buchanan had like any conversation about what his outlook might be after this season?
We've had brief conversations about those things, but he, like I, we're focused on the moment. Certainly nowadays kids have options, kids have choices, and those things we'll deal with. The approach that I take to all those things is please let us play as long as we can, because as long as we're playing, I don't have to deal with that crap. But we've had conversations, and he'll make the right decision on what's best for he and his family and the Rhode Island Rams.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
And Jim, you mentioned you got 3 weeks left. Obviously, the expectations were high coming into the year. You're the preseason favorites, and you guys have delivered. You're 5-0 in the legs, 7-2. What has impressed you most with the way your guys have handled that? And then what's kind of the message to hit this last stretch?
Well, I think what's impressed me is just and I've mentioned this almost every week, when you ask me what I was pleased about in terms of how we played, is that, we've handled the ups and downs in the proper stride and the proper demeanor. I think that's what this team has. I think there's a confidence, that whatever the situation may be, we can find a way to either dig in and get back into it, or if we're able to go ahead and start fast and be able to stay in control of it. Certainly, every game is up and down, and you really don't know how they're going to unfold. But I've been very pleased with their steadiness and their commitment to focusing on, coach speak, one play at a time, one game at a time. I mean, everybody on this call will say the same thing. It's just a hard thing to attain. I mentioned that to them this morning. You do have 3 games. It's human nature to say, okay, we got to win 3 games to be able to be where we want to be. Well, each one of those 3 games is a championship game, and each one of those teams have an opportunity to beat you. So you better be able to keep focused on the task at hand. And right now becomes, Tuesday practice and preparation for Elon. And that's kind of where this team has been pretty good, holding on to that message and performing in that manner.
Did the run last year, has that been helpful along those lines?
That's hard to say. I think that there, certainly to be able to go through that last year, I think we had a similar flavor a little bit in terms of finding ways to win. But I think that yes and no. Obviously, you've been there before, so it's not like, oh my God, here we are at this point in time in November. Every year I've coached here and everywhere else, I've always used that statement that the games you remember are played in November because that's where everything shapes up. Um, so last year certainly helpful to have been there and to know you've been a former champion, but you're trying to repeat, maybe more difficult. I don't know. We got to go beat Elon and we got to then go to Maine, then we got to go get Hampton at home and we'll see where we stand. But I think certainly having players back from that run is helpful.
All right, Jim. Thanks as always for the time here today. Safe travels to Elon and